Hello and welcome to today's UUKi webinar. My name is Katherine Allinson and I'm a policy researcher that works for UUKi's Go International Standout campaign, and today I'm going to be talking to you about our work on widening participation in outward mobility. And what that basically means is the work that we're doing to try to support more students to go abroad. Okay. So, a little bit of background as to why we are doing this piece of work. UUKi's Go International Standout campaign currently holds the UK strategy for outward student mobility for the whole of the United Kingdom, and we also have a national target as part of that work. Our target is to double the number of students, the percentage of students going abroad by 2020, which is quite an ambitious target for us. And so we wanted to do a piece of work to support the sector and its wider efforts in encouraging more students to take up the opportunity to study, work and volunteer abroad during their UK degree. So that's why we launched the Go International Standout campaign, which we launched in November of 2017. To date, we've had 86 universities sign up to this campaign, so it's really great to see this commitment across the sector to try and encourage more and more students to take up these really life-changing opportunities. The work that I'm going to be talking about today is particularly how to target students from more disadvantaged and underrepresented groups who, as it stands, are quite underrepresented in mobility also. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. If you want more information about UUKi's Go International Standout campaign, the link at the beginning of this presentation will take you to our website, or if you Google it, I'm sure will be one of the first options that come up for you. So, just to confirm what I'm talking about, when we talk about outward mobility in the campaign, we're talking about opportunities for students to study, work and volunteer abroad. And that's any type of those types of activities. So we're talking about doing a full year study abroad, which is probably the more traditional method of study abroad, all the way down to work placement, semester abroad, doing summer schemes, doing internships abroad and volunteering opportunities. So it's a very wide spectrum and kind of a broad range of activities that we're interested in. However, currently, only roughly 6.6% of the UK higher education undergraduate population go abroad during their degree. So we're talking about quite low numbers of students. And the campaign is designed to try to encourage more of those students to go abroad. So as I said, we've got this target, and the target is to get us to 13% by 2020. So this is the kind of work that we're doing to underpin the sector's efforts to achieve this target. One of the reasons that we talk a lot about the importance of sending more students abroad is because the research that we've done in the UUKi Go International team shows year on year a very positive correlation with students that are mobile and more positive outcomes once they finish their degrees. In short, mobile students tend to get better degrees and better jobs. And I've just got some stats here for you on that. So students that are mobile are 19% more likely to get a first class honours in their degree. They're 10% more likely to be in a graduate level job when they graduate from university, 20% less likely to be unemployed than their non-mobile peers, and just 6 months after graduating are earning roughly a 7% higher average salary. So there's some really great benefits to going abroad that our research has found. Of course, it's not just about your employment outcomes and your academic outcomes post-university. Going abroad is a really enriching experience for students, and we talk a lot about the different types of skills that students can develop for both their professional and work life and their personal life. So these are just some of the skills on your screen that students have self-reported that they developed whilst being abroad. This is part of the student perspectives on Going International research. I've linked both the resources in the top hand corner of this slide if that's something that you're interested in kind of reading more about. But largely, students reported developing skills such as problem solving, resilience, adaptability, curiosity, all really, really important skills for this kind of 2018 global workforce. It's also responding to employers' need for these types of skills. The stats that I've just brought up at the bottom of this page show from a CBI survey of employers in the UK that UK employers were dissatisfied with graduates' international cultural awareness and their language skills. But again, these are skills that can be developed during a period abroad. So why were we interested in doing a project looking to widen participation in outward mobility? Well, what we've found year on year with our research, the Gone International series of cohort studies, is that students from more disadvantaged and underrepresented groups are consistently underrepresented in mobility. That is, that their participation rate is just not equatable with their average participation rate. So I've got an example here from the 2018 report, which is also free to download on our website for anyone that's interested. So the average participation rate for the 2015-16 graduating cohort was 7.2% of participation. So 7.2% of those students spent at least one period abroad during their degree programme. But as you can see from some of these statistics, when we looked at particular demographics of students, we found that there was underrepresentation. So Black students were participating at 4.2% compared to 7.2%, Asian students at 5.5%, students living with disabilities were at 6.1%, less advantaged students, and by this we mean students from lower socio-economic backgrounds, were at 5.1%, students from low participation neighbourhoods at 4.3%, and students that had experienced care were at 1.2%. We also did some work in this research looking at part-time students, again very low participation rate, 0.4%, mature students were at 3%, and students that were first in their family to go to university were at 5%. So you can see across the board this underrepresentation in students from particular demographics engaging with the opportunity to be mobile and going abroad and taking up these opportunities. What's particularly striking about this underrepresentation, I suppose, is that we talked already about the positive benefits of going abroad, and these are more pronounced for students from disadvantaged and underrepresented groups, and these statistics show some of those for you. So mature students who were mobile were earning a 10% higher starting salary compared to a 7% higher starting salary for the average for the cohort, and BME students who were mobile were 17% more likely to be in a graduate job when compared to the national average, which was 10% more likely to be in a graduate job. And what this basically means is that the research suggests students who are least likely to participate in a period of mobility abroad are the ones that have the most to gain from such an experience. So that's why we decided to do this piece of work. So the Widening Participation in Outward Mobility project was a 15-month project that was run by UUKi on behalf of the Department for Education through an Erasmus Key Action 3 fund. And what we did was we produced a report and a toolkit. The report looked at the patterns and trends in mobility for students from the target demographics, the underrepresented groups, and the toolkit was a resource that had case studies, guidance and feedback from students on ways to improve the current mobility offer across the UK. We worked with 20 universities and colleges throughout this project, and it was a very meaty piece of work, and we really tried to ensure that there was something for everyone across this piece of work. So the student groups that this project focused on were students from a low socio-economic background, so less advantaged students, students from low participation neighbourhoods, Black and minority ethnic students, students living with disabilities, and students that were care leavers. The research found that, similarly to the research that I've just flagged, again, that there was this under-participation across all of the demographics in mobility. Another interesting aspect of this piece of work was when we looked at students that were in more than one demographic, that had intersecting identities, we found that the mobility rate, which was already low, would kind of just drop off a cliff right at the end. And this graphic on the screen now shows you that, where we looked at students from, for example, a low socio-economic group, so a group that are already underrepresented in mobility, and then when we split this by ethnicity, we could see that BME students were less likely to go abroad. So there's a question of compounded barriers to mobility, and it's something that we all need to be very aware of when designing programmes, that we're ensuring that we're addressing all the barriers a student might face to going abroad. So one of the positive findings from this report was that students don't seem to be put off by location. And what we mean by that is that the top 9 locations that students went to on mobility as the national average was the same across all of the demographics. This was a really good finding for us because historically there was some sort of, I guess, myths about students not being interested, for example, in going very far away from home, not wanting to do kind of long haul flights, but that wasn't the findings from the data. And you can probably guess, if you work in the mobility field, what those 9 countries are, but I put them here just for reference. But the good kind of positive message here is that the location of the mobility doesn't seem to be putting students off going abroad. Similarly, the national pattern for mobility is that roughly half of mobility is delivered through the Erasmus programme, and around half is delivered through provider-led programmes. And by that, we basically mean any programme or bilateral agreement developed by a university and kind of delivered in-house, I suppose. That pattern is also reflected for students from the more disadvantaged and underrepresented groups. There was one exception to this, which was that BME students seem to be more likely to undertake a period of mobility via a provider-led programme. So we wanted to do some analysis of what that might be and try to figure out if there was something particular about the Erasmus programme that wasn't attractive. And so, but what we ended up finding was that if we looked at the data for BME students and we looked at only 8 weeks plus, i.e. of an Erasmus programme, then their pattern reflected the national pattern, i.e. half going abroad through Erasmus and half going abroad through provider-led programmes, which led us to believe that it was because students from the BME demographic were more likely to participate in what we would call a short-term mobility period, i.e. a period of mobility for 1 to 4 week duration. And that really was the main finding of this whole piece of research, was that across the board, across all of the 5 demographics that the research looked at, students were more likely to participate in a short-term mobility period than their peers. This represents a kind of a national trend that we're seeing at the moment in growth in this type of offer. So I have some pie charts on the left hand of your screen here which show the growth that we've just seen across the board, where short-term mobility is making up a bigger chunk of the offer for universities. We're seeing more of these programmes introduced. And our recent mobility management survey also found that short-term mobility was an area of growth for universities and also a high priority for universities in the coming years. This is good to see, this development, because one of the things that we've talked about on this campaign is having a diverse offer of programmes. So offering long-term mobility, mid-term mobility and short-term mobility to ensure that there is something for everyone. And definitely the finding from this research that disadvantaged and underrepresented groups seem to be more likely to participate in short-term mobility was a major message that we got from the piece. I've just included an infographic here just showing the participation in 1 week mobility. And you can see for students from a low participation neighbourhood and BME students, they're at 15% and 14.7% respectively. So that's a really big portion of students that are just going abroad for a week. Another part of this research, we spoke to students from the demographics about their experience, either students that hadn't been abroad, we asked them what the barriers were that had stopped them going abroad, or students that had been abroad and we asked them about their experience and the challenges that they faced in country. This is a really important piece of the research and we're continuing to do focus groups. So if anyone would like us to come to the university and run a focus group for your students, we're very happy to do that. Please just get in touch with the team. We're trying to really build this piece of research across the sector. These top 3 skills are flagged by all students, regardless of background, when they're asked about challenges to going abroad. Funding remains a key issue for students. Language skills and concern around their ability to converse in other countries is always quite high, and accommodation, both where students are going to live whilst they're abroad and also where students are going to live on return, particularly semester students who are concerned about getting a half-year rent or a lease in a house. So what we tried to do in this research was we tried to focus on the particular barriers and the particular challenges for students from the different demographics, and we really asked them to reflect on these experiences. We were very lucky. The students in our focus groups were incredibly candid and generous and made a number of observations and recommendations that are all in the toolkit that you can review and is also free to download from the website, but I've just flagged some of them here. A lot of the barriers were to do with perceptions of going abroad, this kind of idea of perceived barriers, but some of them were very practical in their nature. A lot of concerns about the unknown and fear of the unknown, leaving support networks, having it be your first time abroad, and concerns about the support that might be available in country. So I think if we could work on our messaging to just ensure that we're addressing these concerns early on, we might see a greater uptake in mobility for students from these demographics. Up in the top right hand corner, I've just linked to a resource that we've made available on our digital toolkit, which can show you the approach that we took with our focus groups if you would like to replicate it. So as I said, we're happy to come and do that for you, or alternatively you can run your own focus groups using the method that we did, or adapt it for your own. I've just included some quotes here, which I think were incredibly important as a part of this research, because this really is about the personal impact that mobility has had on students. And as you can see, you know, really hugely impacted by their experience abroad. I tend to flag the quote on the bottom right hand corner where a student said, "It's literally changed everything for me." That was a 2-week mobility period in Europe that the student undertook, and it really did change their perspective, and they changed their plans for the future, decided to do a master's. A really inspiring story. So I think we really shouldn't underestimate the impact of mobility and the impact of a shorter term mobility for some students. So the last part of the toolkit was to do with collating good practice and case studies of examples where universities are already trying to address some of these challenges and provide this like additional support for students. So I've just flagged some of these here, and they were very wide-ranging. And as I said earlier in the webinar, we really tried to ensure that there was something for everyone, that there was a piece of practice that would be suitable for any institution of any size and of any size mobility team. So student mentoring schemes, summer internships, disability teams being actively involved in providing support for students. Marketing activities is also a big one, and working with your comms team is quite crucial there. Intercultural competencies modules, which is where universities were developing modules that were to support the mobility experience itself, not just credit mobility, but actually how to engage with your mobile experience and how to get the most out of it. CV workshops, targeted funding and ways in which to get that funding in order to target it for students. Dedicated support roles in universities, ambassador schemes and leadership programs, a real variety of different practices across the sector. I just thought I'd flag two very briefly, just so to give you an example of the kind of case studies that we had in the toolkit. So this is from the University of Strathclyde, and this was actually from the Disability Service at University of Strathclyde, who took a kind of whole institutional approach, I guess you could say, to embed in mobility the opportunity to go abroad throughout their service. So right from the very first meeting that a student would have with their disability advisor, the opportunity to go abroad is discussed. It's flagged with the student and signposted with them very early on, and then a lot of work is done to ensure that the appropriate support is in place for that student whilst they go abroad. And I've just listed some of the different activities that they do here, but they have quite extensive risk assessment. They organise pre-visits for students with particularly complex support. They do work shadowing with international institutions to learn more about how disability is supported in different countries. And of course, they're involved in the review of a student's reasonable adjustment agreement, which if you took anything from this webinar today, I think that would be a crucial aspect to take away, ensuring that if your students have got reasonable adjustments in place, that you are in discussion with the disability team at your university to try to ensure that the student has adequate support when they're abroad. The second one I was going to flag was the Northumbria University's ambassador scheme. I talk about ambassador schemes a lot. I think they're a really interesting way of trying to encourage more students to go abroad, largely because we heard back from students that they found out about mobility periods through their peers, from friends on their courses and from talking to others on their course. So it's really quite an important piece of work, I think, this peer-to-peer support, and ambassador schemes are a great way of doing this. And there's some more detail there that you can read at your leisure, but basically the Northumbria University offered a grant to students to support their mobility experience, and in exchange, when they come back to the UK, finish off their 3rd or 4th year, they would be active ambassadors for the programme, talk about their experience, write blogs, present at events, etc. really fantastic way to try and engage the home population to be more mobile. So the toolkit has 15 recommendations, which are on your screen now. I think, again, we're really trying to encourage this idea of just ensuring that everyone in your university has a role to play in providing really strong mobility for students, and just making sure that you're talking to all the different teams and that you're in touch with colleagues and lean on the expertise of your colleagues. No one in mobility is expected to be an expert across all of these different areas, so speak to your disability team, speak to your outreach team, speak to your legal and risk team to get better support in these areas. If I was to flag a couple of the recommendations at this stage, the first one would of course be this taking a whole institutional approach, but I would also flag being student-led. I really think that the focus groups were very rich, and the findings from the focus groups are very rich, and actually the students who've been abroad are best placed to tell you about ways to improve the service and ways that you can kind of provide better support for them going forward. I also think starting preparation is extremely important. And all of the students unanimously, pretty much across all focus groups, said that they would like to have learned about the mobility at an earlier opportunity. So that's something to really consider. And of course, creating an ambassador scheme, I think, is a really essential way of ensuring that you're engaging with your students. And it has the benefit of also upskilling the students that have been abroad, because they'll get opportunities to do public speaking, to write blogs, to do all these types of activities. So it's a really great experience for them as well. So we've come to an end now. I just wanted to flag, we have a digital toolkit on our website, and these are just some of the resources that we have on there. It covers all types of resources, from social media gifts to videos to guidance documents to event packets to presentations much like this one, and I'm sure this webinar will be added to it. Again, these are all free to download from the website, and you can use them at your leisure, and we hope that they're helpful to you in your efforts to bolster the numbers and support of mobility at your institution. Additionally, if there's something not on here that you think that you would like us to develop, please get in touch with us, because we are very happy to take recommendations from the sector about what would be a useful resource for colleagues. So that's the end of this webinar today. I hope some of that was helpful to you. If you have any questions, you can just get in touch with us. The details are on the slide. But just to suggest an activity that we always do at the end of our presentations, which is to ask you to commit to an action following this session. We've got some examples there, but just for some first steps for you, if you're thinking about this is an area of work that you would like to be more active in, these are some first steps that you can take. Booking in meetings with colleagues and organising workshops are nice first steps. If you do decide to do any of these, please do tweet about it. We have a campaign hashtag, which is #GoIntil, so please use that and let us know how you get on. And as I said, anyone with questions, you can contact the Outward Mobility team here at UUKi, and we would be delighted to help support you in your work.